Good morning, everyone. Hi and welcome, and thanks for attending this morning's webinar on such a lovely, warm summer's day. I know it's pretty humid out there, so appreciate everyone's time. My name's Phil. I'm Business Development Manager here at LegalZoom, and I'm proud to be hosting this webinar this morning to you all. In this webinar today, we're going to be giving you an introduction into Legal Manager. Legal Manager is the tool that allows you to create and manage a huge array of documents, policies, and notices for all of your business needs. So due to the huge interest in Legal Manager and therefore the number of applicants, registrants we've had for this week's webinar, we have actually muted all the microphones, but we will have time for a Q&A at the end of this session as per the agenda. If you do have any questions though, in the right hand side of the window that you're watching the webinar, you will see there is a Q&A box. Please do pose any questions that you may have in there and we will come back to them at the end of the session. I'm also joined to this morning by my colleague Luke Stringer, who's our marketing manager here at LegalZoom. He will be here just helping support the webinar and also proposing the questions at the end that anyone has entered into the Q&A section. So just to rehash over the agenda for this morning, first of all, I'm going to discuss the importance of business documents. Following that, we're then going to dive into a visual presentation of Legal Manager itself, looking at the health check and the document search functionality. Following that, we're going to go into the law guides, how to find them and how to use them. Then into probably what you've all been waiting for, the creating and management of legal documents. And finally, as I said before, we'll wrap that up with a Q&A. So, as it's past 11 o'clock now, without further ado, let's get started. So, as we're all aware, legal documents for your business play an essential role in protecting the interests of your business and the business owners over the whole course of the company's lifetime. We're aware that tackling legal needs, it can sometimes seem like a really daunting task or even concerning around the costs that you would incur from a lawyer or solicitor in creating each document, notice, or even policy that you need to have for your business. But it doesn't have to be. It's often wiser to start protecting your business from the very start and not leave it too late, but it is never too late to start implementing and empowering your business with better compliance practices by using a tool like this. There are several key legal documents that most businesses will need to comply with all the legal obligations of running a business. For example, a lot of you probably employ people. If you employ people, as you're already aware, employees must have a written statement of the main terms of their employment within 2 months of starting the role. You can be liable for a fine of up to 4 weeks of the employee's pay if you didn't have this in place. So another example could be, which is very relevant to all, is if you have a website. As you're aware, back in 2018 and the GDPR Data Protection Act, alongside with e-commerce regulations, you are required to explain certain information to the visitors that attend to your website, and that's generally documented in what's called a website privacy policy or just a privacy policy. So by ensuring that you consider all obligations of a business and implementing good compliance practices, you will protect your business from these fines and indefinitely create a much better chance of success of your business. So let's dive in. I'm going to now share my screen and let's have a look at the Legal Manager tool itself. So hopefully all you can see now is you can see the home screen of Legal Manager. It's very user-friendly, very easy to use, and as you can see, there's explanations on the widgets. At the top here, we have a search bar to be able to search for anything, documents, policies, notices, or even legal news. Down the bottom, we've got some really hot legal topics that we can drill into from here. So we've got information and legal topics around business startups, debts and recovery, e-commerce. You can see, but if you click on any of these, for instance, if we clicked on employment, that would take us into all the employment related documentation. But just going back to the main screen again, as per the agenda, I wanted to dive into probably what is one of the most key useful bits of functionality when first starting out with a solution is the business legal health check. Now, I know a lot of you possibly feel like you're empowered already as an existing company. As startups, maybe not so much, but this business health check is really applicable for everybody who uses the solution. And I'll show you why now. So if we go into the business health check, It gives us an explanation, as it does with nearly every document or bit of information around the context of what that information is for, what that document's there for. As you can see, this is just explaining just that the legal health check is just to make sure that you have the right policies, documents, and procedures in place to protect your business. The way that this works is by a questionnaire and asking around several elements of your business, and I'm going to take you through that now. So let's get started with the business health check. So, first of all, when we start the business health check, it's asking us, do we have employees? Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to use the example of my brewery company. We're a brewer, we have a brewery, we have a bar, we have a website that we sell business to consumer and business to business. And therefore, we do have a premises and employee people to manage the business. So yes, that we do have employees. Next of all, it's asking me around particular terms and conditions or obligations of the employment working for our company that obviously comply and meet the needs of the legislation in the industry for running a business, doing what we do. In this case, our employees do actually have a contract. In the contract, it doesn't actually include any remuneration of benefits because they don't have any mobile phones or any car allowance working from here. But it does include working from working hours and overtime, holiday allowance. It also notice to terminate. We've got that included in there. As we're a brewer and we're creating new products all the time and recipes for our various beers and ales, these are intellectual property for our business. In which case, although some of my employees may have created that recipe, me as the business owner and my brewery, we own that intellectual property. So we definitely don't want employees going elsewhere and creating that recipe that they've created using the tools and the facilities in my business. We own that. So we definitely do want to include ownership of intellectual property within this contract. Disciplinary and grievance procedures. I think that's quite common. Most businesses that employ someone require that in the contract. Paternity and maternity agreements. Yes, we definitely do. Sickness. And finally, as I mentioned, there's 5 employees in my business. As you'll all be aware, that if you employ 5 people, we have to provide a pension scheme. So yes, that is currently already included. So in this case, there's only one thing that isn't included because that's something that we don't currently offer as a business. Next screen, so employee handbook. Not all businesses that have employee contracts put in place do actually create an employee handbook. An employee handbook is really important to protect your business in outlining a comprehensive list of procedures, policies, and conditions of your business. At the moment, I don't actually have an employee handbook created, so the answer would be no to a lot of these. In this case, every single one of them. As you can see, though, we've got various different areas of policies and procedures that you may want to or may not want to include within your handbook. If you don't want to include them, for instance, if you didn't want it to be a smoke-free workplace or you did, you can just select either or on that. Going through, do you plan to use any external consultants? A lot of businesses do. In my business, we do a lot of the development in-house. We don't actually have the requirement now, or I don't foresee in the future, in the coming future at least, any requirement for consultants. So no is the answer for that one. Are we self-employed and working from home? As I just stated, we are a brewery and we do have a premises. So no, we are not working from home. We are all working on site. As we're working on site, something that you're probably aware due to the fire and healthy legislation of 2005, that we do actually have to have a fire risk assessment. Now, as a business, we were conscious and aware of this. So in our case, we do have this, but there may be some businesses out there that are starting or even trading, existing businesses that maybe have just taken on a premises and weren't aware that they needed this in place. Therefore, we would select no. In this case, we do have one in place, so I'm going to select yes. Health and safety policy. We need a health and safety policy in place. Actually, at the moment, we've been trading for 12 months. I've got to be honest, we haven't actually got one in place. So no would be the answer for this, for all of these. Some people may have a health and safety policy in place, but it may not contain all of the relevant information that's required about these particular areas. So effectively, you would just select the ones that it does contain and no to the ones that it doesn't. Most of us have a website. We do have a website. We do have a privacy policy, but this is just confirming as a benefit of the higher tier version of Legal Manager does contain an advice line and a review service backed by lawyers and solicitors to review policies, documentation that you may create, or answer a call to answer any queries or questions that you may have about any legal matters. In this case, our privacy policy has been drafted, but it hasn't been reviewed by a professional. So I'm going to select no. Final couple of questions in the health check. What type of business you are? We're a limited company in our case, but as you can see, it caters for all other business requirements. And as this is, again, an obligation of creating a business limited company in the UK, we do have a shareholder agreement in place already. If you don't, then you will need one. You would select no for the answer to that. Finally, last question, have you pursued a customer for payment of overdue invoices? We generally take payment at delivery or completion of goods to the customer. So we are lucky in the fact that we actually haven't had to chase money overdue invoices. Although with all the economic uncertainty recent following COVID, I'm sure there's some of our business-to-business customers that we potentially might have to chase payment for invoices due to the effect of COVID and the effect on their industry. But currently at the moment, we haven't had to, so no, luckily, is the answer for that. So now we've completed the business health check. As you can see, it outlines all the various areas following the questions and the answers that we put in of documents, contracts, or policies that we should have in place. Now, as you're aware, I did actually select that I do already have an employment contract in place, but due to some of the variables that maybe I didn't, this is recommending that maybe I relook at those employment contracts, and as legal manager is kept up to date consistently by lawyers and solicitors to comply all the documentation or notices within this solution that match the needs of the obligations within the industry of running a business. It's maybe worth me redoing that document again or adding that document to contain new legislation that maybe not have been there when I did originally create the document. An employee handbook, I haven't got one. It's advising me to go and create one. Health and safety compliance review, that's definitely something that we need to do. And our terms and conditions for website. So as you can see, as I hover over these and they're highlighting, I can drill into these contracts. So for instance, if we went into employment contract, for instance, and I click on employment contract, it takes me into the employment contract, gives me a breakdown of exactly what that contract's about, why I would need it, what I need it for, and also any other documents that, as you can see before, it's recommending the employee handbook down the bottom of here that maybe should be used in combination with this document, and also the compatible reasons. And I'm going to come on to this later on the session, but you can see here the Start Now button, that will literally take me straight into starting to create that document. Once I've gone the business health check, I can actually print these results out if I needed to, if I want to share them with someone else in the business for them to have a look, or again, just leave the results in there. At any time, if you feel like you made a mistake, you can just reset the questionnaire and start all over again. So next part, law guides. A lot of businesses are not empowered from a legal understanding and would like to be, but due to the costs of generally paying for lawyers and solicitors' time, it's something that gets put on the back burner. Now, Legal Manager doesn't just help you create documents, but it really upskills and empowers you as a business owner or employee into legal matter areas. As you can see here, we have headline topics, things like business startups. So if you're a new company, depending on the type of the company you are, let's say you're starting a limited company, for instance, drilling into limited company is giving us an insight to what a limited company is. Some key documents, as I mentioned before, we know that there's a legal requirement and obligation to have a shareholder agreement as a limited company, which I do have for my brewery. These documents are highlighted on the right-hand side, and again, as you can see, as I'm hovering over, I can click into that and continue creating that document off the cuff straight away. There's also, as we go down here, a huge amount of information. If we click on how to form a company, we can see here, it's giving us a huge amount of information about the types of documents, forms, and links to those forms that we may need to create, information around what goes into those forms and why we're creating them, and lots of other really relevant and useful information to empower you around legislation and regulations of running businesses here in the UK. The law guides cater for a considerable amount of information, not just on creating companies, but if we go back, we can see, for instance, if you wanted to look at intellectual property, and you have a trademark or considering a trademark, again, there's a trademark agreement contract ready to go, mate. Or if you just want to understand a bit more about trademarks and the industry and what you need to do and what they could do for you as a business, again, a huge amount of content in here. And this is constantly updated pretty much, if it needs be, daily by the lawyers and solicitors with any changes, significant changes or minor changes within the industry. So always making sure that the contracts that you're creating and the information that it's feeding you is up to date and relevant. Alongside in here as well, something that as it shows you how up to date, you can see that in these topics, there's a lot of them are mentioning coronavirus. So if we looked in employment, for instance, and coronavirus, you can see here the huge array of topics and information to do with furloughing, sick pay, even vaccines, and whether a requirement. And if I click onto that, we again states the Work Act and gives us all the information. And again, we can drill even further to further information from this. So you can see how powerful this tool is really for empowering yourselves as a business. We also, amongst the information in there, we also, which is really good, is we have the business bulletins. The business bulletins is on the homepage, as I've just drilled into. This is the place to come into to keep yourself up to date. As you can see, last month, for instance, there was 4 new articles have been posted. Things about COVID, workplace testing. If we want to read information around that, just click into it. We can download that as a PDF. And email it to someone. We can print it off, or we can just manage it within the solution and benefit from drilling down into further bits of information or links to websites should we want to continue researching that particular part of information even further or deeper. So this really empowers you, keeping you up to date consistently of any changes, legislations, and if there was any implications of the changes in legislation that affected the documents would also be updated regularly to match that as well. So we also at the top of there have a search engine. The search engine you would have seen on the front screen as well. But let's say, for instance, we were interested in health, for instance. So if we search for health or even health and safety, you can see how comprehensive the search engine is. It actually brings up health that is listed in any document or law guide, broken into 2 sides. We've got 11 pages where health is mentioned in various bits of content related to employment, health and safety. And on the right hand side as well, where health is mentioned in any of the contracts or documents, you will see the ability, there's 2 pages here of all the documents, for instance, health and safety, compliance and review and policy creator, as was highlighted by our legal health check for my business, the brewery. We can then just drill into that and start creating that document straight from here. It highlights obviously the compatible countries that this document is for, but when we create a document, as you're going to see shortly, you're able to filter by countries should that document be only applicable or certain terms relevant to only a particular country in the UK. So I think you can see how powerful from an information point of view, but on the countries, if you wanted to, you can filter the information up here per country as well. So I think the bit that everyone really wanted to see is the document creation tool. So if we go into the final tab at the top here, and we've got my documents, as I mentioned before, there's many ways to start creating a document, either from information, from the business health check, or just by searching for a document and going straight into creating it. Once we have started creating the documents, we're able to save the documents. This doesn't just allow us to create the documents, but it allows us to store the documents and then edit, copy, or even create reminders. So if we look at these documents, for instance, here, an employment contract, and we draw on the drop down here, what we're able to do is actually either download this, and if we want to download this, we can download this document as a Word version or as a PDF. We're able to duplicate that document. You might see, for instance, on here, this employee agreement, for instance, actually says copy because it was a copy. I recruited another member of staff, and when I recruit that other member of staff, the terms and conditions of the bulk of the employment contract were the same, but I had to change the name and their address and their start date, for instance. So rather than creating the document again, which I'm going to go into creating in a second, I was able just to copy that document and go in and edit that document. Let's go into one of the documents. So if we go into this document here and we get started, this document has actually been nearly completed. You can see at the top of here, we've got a progress bar to tell you how far progression you are through completing that document. All of the documents are broken down into various stages and areas. As you can see, green with a tick obviously means it's complete and it's done, and red with a cross means it's not. We can see that represented here on the left-hand side of the document, or we can see that in the bar at the top, which as we hover over it, as you can see, employee, it matches up with these. So we can either drill into it from there or drill in from there. As this document was pretty much created, if we go back to the beginning of the document, although we've already created these steps, if we did need to re-edit the document at any stage, again, you can go and drop it into here. And as we're going into the document and filling in information on the document itself, what's really useful is we can hover over and get an explanation if we're not too sure about what it is that we're filling in there, or some of the questions are quite self-explanatory, but some aren't. It gives us either a detailed or a small description of what that is. As we are filling in the information as well, as you'll see, it highlights on the contract, which is really useful, and again, empowering yourselves to understand, not just hand-holding you through completing it, but actually teaching you about creating these documents and where this information should sit whilst doing so. As this document needs to be finished, if we go back to certain areas here, it's highlighted red because we have missed out. So I'm going to put my employees here on probation for 6 months. And if we go next, you'll see that's now gone to green. I'm not going to go through creating the whole document. I think that the wizard for creating the document for most people on this presentation is probably quite self-explanatory. We have either various drop-downs of preset fields, or in some cases, it may be an open field if it's for information like a name, for instance, that would then allow you to free type in any of the information that you need. Just to mention, although these are predefined and helping you create these documents, if you did want to bespoke these documents even more so, as I've shown you before of the download feature, if you download as a Word document, you would have then full ability to effectively bespoke that document to entirely your needs. What I would advise is anyone that may have a requirement to do that, I would strongly advise that you take the higher tier of Legal Manager and have the advice and the review service, and therefore any documents that you do create and bespoke outside the parameters of the software, you're able to send from this software to a lawyer or solicitor, and on a 3-day SLA, have them review that documents for the bespoke elements that you've created within there. So let's go ahead and finish this document. As you can see here, again, I must have missed a section on here, and we can see here at the bottom it's highlighting that. If I'm not too sure, again, we can pull up the explanation. In this case, it's quite self-explanatory. Can they run up a limited amount of expenses without obtaining your permission? Yes, they can, and the expense limit will be £100. Will you offer the employee any benefits? Currently at this time, we don't. So as you can see here, let's go into the other section of the contract that hasn't been completed. Oh, so I've missed off quite a few questions in this section. So do you want the disciplinary rules and procedures included in this agreement, or have you already got these in the handbook? As I mentioned before, we don't have a handbook and we have to create a handbook. But for the purpose of now, let's include these within the agreement, and at a later date, I will create a handbook for my employees. Does the employee need to follow a procedure or take any steps to raise a grievance? Yes, they will do. And this is going to include in this agreement. And if they need to speak to anyone around that, John Smith is the man. I think they have 30 days to appeal for that. So as you can see, all the sections are green now. We've got a tick against every single section of this document. Everything has been completed. If you want to read the document within the view here, you can. So you can see the whole entire document has been created. And then we simply just save that document. Once we've saved the document, if we go back into the My Documents section, you can now see that it's gone from 92% to 100%. We've got the timestamp of when the document was finished or starts created, and then if we want to email that document to the person who is going to be signing that, or even add it to a e-signing platform, we simply again download that document as a PDF and then attach that to an email or import it into our HR or CRM system. If I needed to look at this document again, let's say in a year's time, I may want to update these contracts and make sure that they comply with any changes in legislation that may happen or may not between now and then, I'm going to put a reminder in myself. So another great feature of this is being able to set reminders within the parameters of the software. So I'm going to say I want it on a year for now, and I'm going to say check document is up to date. And that's going to remind me on the 10th of June 2020. Set a reminder against that. Great, and I'll get an email reminder when that actually comes through. So not only is it going to remind me within the solution, but I'm going to have an email reminder on that too. As you can see, as we've got a reminder on there, we have a little clock up there that's showing us that there is a reminder being set for that. From here, if you want to add any notes, you can create subfolders. So you may want to create an employment folder and allocate all of your employment agreements, employee handbooks in there. You may want to have an intellectual property folder and create your trademark licenses, store them in there. If there's any notes that you want to leave for anyone else that may log in and use the solution after that for creating those documents, or to remind them when creating these documents about something they need to be aware of, then you can attach notes, and you can look at the history of the document that's been created and the amendments that have been made. So it really is an extremely powerful solution for empowering you from a knowledge perspective, and also for creating, managing all of your legal documents, policies, and notices. So that's Legal Manager in a nutshell. I think what we'll do now is we will open up to any questions that we may have.